All right, everyone, we'll go ahead and get started. It's 9:30, so we'll just start right on the dot here. Want to just start with some quick introductions. My name is Dr. Samuel Montano. I'm the psychological service coordinator here at Fresno City.
I am Dr. Michael Rita. I'm the postdoc fellow here at Fresno City.
Mike was here last year as well as a psychological intern. So he's got a couple years with us, which is nice. I myself, there's a lot of new faces here, folks that I don't really know. But I've also been a part of the district for quite a while before being coordinator. I did my psych intern about almost 10 years ago. And then my postdoc at Reedley was staff psychologist at UC Merced for about 3-4 years, and then came back here as a coordinator. So it's kind of cool to come back full circle as well. So we're really excited to give you this presentation today on early identification, intervention, and just more of how you can utilize all of the services at Fresno City for student support. So that obviously includes us, but we're going to talk about some of the other ancillary departments that can help you out as well. The intervention is not going to be in-depth like psychological intervention. It's really going to be much more of how you as faculty, staff, administrators can engage a student who may be struggling, right? So that's really our main goal today. I also want to make this somewhat interactive. So Mike and I will be asking questions, more so like soliciting like previous experiences you may have had in the classroom or with a student. Something may come up where you're like, I don't know if I handled that right, or what could I have done differently? So if you have those experiences that you can recall, when we ask questions, share that. Because we can turn this into a little bit of a didactic, a little bit of a open dialogue too along the way. Also, our virtual folks, feel free to use the chat function for questions. One of us will be monitoring that. So feel free to use that for questions. Okay. And feel free to ask questions along the way. Just raise your hand. And I think that's how you'll get more of this, because we just go slide by slide. Yeah, it's going to be cool. You'll get some info, but asking questions, I think, will be great. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Rita first here.
Okay. Okay, there we go. All right. So when staff and faculty approach students who are in crisis effectively and refer out to the appropriate resources, they have a unique opportunity to mitigate some of the intense behavioral responses that require our services, or other student behavior that can be a slippery slope that can lead to disciplinary removal from the school, further stigmatization of mental health, marginalization of mental health issues, or actual harm to the student or others. A lot of the intervention suggestions that we have for you all fit within the umbrella of what we consider in clinical psychology primary prevention. As mental health professionals, we rely a lot on social support, social structures, the systems in which we practice to help mitigate some of these factors, if not remove them entirely, then at least slow everything down for the person that's in crisis, so that by the time that we're called to jump in and intervene, the intensity of the situation has already been mitigated by people that are closest to the student, which are their classmates, their teachers, their professors, administrators that help them out, especially this time of the year, financial aid administrators, right? People in the registrar, helping them organize their class schedules. We rely on you guys a lot to help make our jobs easier. And so we're going to be giving you guys suggestions within that vein today on how to be there for the students you interact with. But with the knowledge too that should anything slip through, or should there be factors that just really can't be mitigated right then and there in the classroom or in your immediate context, psych services is there to help pick things up for you. So what are college students currently experiencing in this limbo period, this post-pandemic, but not really the society that we're finding ourselves in currently? Well, 1 in 5 college students say that their mental health has been significantly worsened throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. pointing to it directly as a source of mental health stress. 80% of college students reported that COVID-19 has negatively impacted their mental health. My guess, my hypothesis is that maybe there's the 20% of super introverted college students that are like, oh, it's great. I didn't have to be in physical class anymore. All these students that, either bullied me or picked on me or just was super awkward to be around. It was great to have that separation from them and be over Zoom. But outside of that, 80% of college students are feeling like the other shoe dropped quickly in the first couple of weeks after lockdown, and then the 2 or 3 years post that. Pandemic has impacted 91% of college students' stress or anxieties, 81% of students' disappointment or sadness, more depressive symptoms, 48% of college students' financial setback. I think, we all had that, but students especially having that financial drain of tuition, right? And 56% of college students having to relocate. We found this, just anecdotally, but a lot of the students coming through in psych services, we hear all the time of students that are children of divorced parents, and all the lockdown procedures, the working from home and learning from home procedures and protocols influenced which parent they would stay with as they were attending classes or working remotely. And you can see here just a quick graph of different symptoms, different mental health symptoms, and the frequency in which they are experienced in students that, following COVID-19 and symptoms that are being directly tied to the COVID-19 phenomenon. So you see here right at the top, not a surprise at all, social isolation, loneliness. This is something that, we're seeing in psych persistent even after the students are connected with each other again. They're coming back to in-person classes, in-person club meetings, they're connecting on campus, but they're doing so within this context of the last 2 years, that kind of connection being really difficult, really anxiety provoking. And so they're still in the process of, as many of us still are, revisiting and relearning a lot of these social skills. A lot of the incoming class this year of 2022, they were high school freshmen and sophomores when COVID hit. And so that cohort of students specifically, they had the awkward social rewriting of social rules during COVID and the initial lockdown, compounded on, some of the developmentally appropriate social awkwardness that they have at that age, right? And so this has persisted even into 2022, 2023. Increased anxiety, struggles with laziness, lots of sleep, decrease in physical activity, all these things going down. You can read it for yourself, but all of this is within this 30% range. So we're not talking about small numbers of students that are expressing these symptoms and concerns all the way to the present day.
I'd like to also note, during the pandemic, our department at Psych Services, we did this for the district, but we created a survey as well. During the pandemic, it was sent out in October of 2020, I believe, where we had an N size of 600 for our district. So most of those were from Fresno City. And one stat that's not on here is suicidality. And, it was a shocking number to see, but out of the 600, I think it was about 70 to 75% of students had endorsed having some sort of suicidal ideation, primarily passive, but having some sort of suicidal ideation. Yeah.
As you're showing the previous slide, I was just sitting here and thinking about if, again, there is no direct correlation to what I'm saying. Again, from a surface level, our students, because they were isolated, for a better word, in their house, they're having all those symptoms, right? However, our students are still choosing to be enrolled in online courses. So now, are they making deliberate? Again, I'm not asking because you may not know the answer. I'm just thinking about, okay, we know this happened. Because of this, you're having mental health issues. if we start offering more courses online, you don't enroll, not or in person, but you're still choosing to enroll in online courses.
Mm-hmm.
So now, and also that's the one thought came to mind.
Mm-hmm.
And the second came to mind is that, now you can go to the next slide, is that like within this short period of time, 2 years from a lifespan of a person, adults, 18, 20, is that how can we build it? Is that resilient? Is it the predisposed things that they had in the past that exacerbated that, or is it just how our populations are becoming? Like I'm trying to process these things in my mind. Is it what are the reasons, right? So that our students are just, if we face some adversity, the reason I'm saying that we are seeing that in workplaces as well. Little bit of adversity in a workplace or change in a schedule, I'm having a mental crisis, right? Which is supposed to be a normal occurrence in a life, right? So are we kind of, what I'm saying is that I hope we are not becoming so overprotective in a nature that we are trying to raise them in a further cocoon that they become dysfunctional more down the road, right? So I mean, all the thoughts that are coming to mind right now.
Well, it's a wonderful thought, and it's a great comment because I think part of that is at play. I think when we think about the online courses that people are taking now, and we were at Convocation the other day, the percentages that were shared with us of how many online courses are being offered and how much of our student body is still online. It is something undoubtedly to consider, the ramifications. Students, the one thing that we did as psych services is even during the pandemic, we're always offering the virtual sessions. And we still do that. That's probably never going to go away. I think there has been some resilience, obviously, as we've gone through this. I think students have been very resilient. I also agree with you in the fact that one of the things we see a lot too is, and I think we talk about this a little later actually, is the adjustment back is very distressing for a lot of students. They haven't been socializing. Now they're expected to maybe sit in a classroom, do classroom presentations, come to groups, and that can be quite intimidating after what we've all been through. So I think that's a barrier as well. That we're trying to work through. I don't know if you have something else, Dr.
Yeah, I think the word motivation kept coming back to my mind as you were speaking, as you were explaining the rationale behind your question, especially the first part of your question of, here is this, now that we do have capacities to come back in person, students are still, a large number of students are still choosing to stay online. And so, given what we're seeing here on the slides, how can we maybe explain that? I think this is anecdotal just on what we've seen in psych. But I think about students that are choosing that because out of a developed resiliency or a self-awareness. The past 2 years have shown them to really think about their experience in the classroom, to think about their experience of learning over Zoom. And they're coming to this decision of, Zoom was an adjustment at first, but I think now I'm finding I'm actually learning better in this environment, or this is more conducive to my work-life balance and schedule. I have kids at home. It's logistically so much easier to be over Zoom. And so that resiliency absolutely is factoring into that decision for many. For many others, an unknown number of students really at this point. I wonder if it's a picking your poison decision, due to my mental health, I'm not really entirely sure what environment I'm really ready for, how I best learn. I know I have to do something with my life. I can't just not take a class. I need to finish. So let's just keep doing it over Zoom. And so it's a, lesser of two evils decision that, that the other shoe of that decision drops probably most likely around midterms. That's when we see the cracks forming in those walls. And so, we don't necessarily have to throw the baby out with bathwater either, that we could recognize and affirm the students that are coming to that decision to stay online through a place of resiliency, while also being really attentive and really sensitive to the students that are just doing this for now while they are still trying to figure out what it is they actually. Does that help answer your question?
it was a thought, right? So I just want to be sure.
Yeah, it's a good dialogue.
We talk about these.
Good dialogue.
It's not a conclusion of any means. It's a thought.
Yeah.
Because this is how we make decisions, right? Because some thought is going to spur a question, and then as a policymaker, we have to do not run with it, right? And then sometimes we run with those things just from a surface level, not thinking deep enough. For example, our students have now experience online education, which they never had the opportunity to. Right? Means again, I'll be right. It's not because of COVID, right? It's forced to us, right? But again, experience something new, right? Again, I'm just still trying to process these ideas because I know that we are making policy with it or decisions based. Is it really good information? Is it really reactionary, or is it that sort of? But I hope your research perhaps in some find some research.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would say to the keep this in mind as we continue to go through this presentation on signs, experiences that you've had with students virtually, right? Because this is early identification, how to see a student who's maybe at risk. And the virtual environment does present very different than the in class. All right, you're right across from someone, you can see their entire body, so you can maybe assess hygiene better, things like that. Whereas virtually, that might be very hard. Someone might show up in pajamas, right? It's something I want you all to think about as we move through this slide. We did have two questions. Let me get to those real quick. Yeah, in the back there.
I'm going to move on to my second one was, I'm doing face-to-face and I use Canvas right alongside it. Started with the first comebacks because they were afraid we'd lock down again. I used to have some students that freak when they think they're going to have to go near Canvas. So it kind of goes both ways. Yeah.
And that's been I think that's also one of the positives actually that's maybe come out of COVID from a psychological perspective, where the student that was too intimidated to walk into our clinic submits the request for services online, and hey, now we're reaching out. We're working with a student who would have never walked into our clinic, and now we're doing virtual therapy with them. So I think that's been one positive, at least from the psych services side of things. That kind of goes with that.
I feel that is, even though I'm still a fan of face-to-face, I feel like I have to kind of, I want to get them out of their fears of Canvas. I have had some that just refuse. They'll just stay on the class rather than set foot or submit so much as one. They'll come to class every day. Well, semester, they won't. And so I'm not really sure what the issue is there, but yeah. So some of them are in face-to-face because they don't want to go near it. But I feel like I have to kind of, because there may come a time when they have to do it.
Indeed. We had a question right here in the front.
It's fine. No one's passed. It's okay.
Okay.
All right. And so we've kind of already touched on this already, but what are some of the things that college students are experiencing with this return to campus? Well, they're navigating their first year college student experience, which is going to be an anxiety-producing thing, no matter what. It's a developmentally appropriate anxiety, we call it, but they're doing so in a context that is still very highly unpredictable, and so there's an elevated stress that comes with that. Changes in sleep schedules, new environments, high academic demands, pressures, being around others. Again, a lot of these, first time away from home for some of them, first time separated from their support systems. A lot of the students that are within 18, 19, 20 kind of range, they all have friends that, have gone away out of state, perhaps to, universities while they're still here. And so they have this, support system disruption. A lot of these have their sources of anxiety and stress and depressive symptoms outside of the COVID context. But what we're finding, for the most part, that some isolated positive and benefits from COVID aside, we're seeing the vast majority of college students having exacerbated anxieties and stresses because of COVID. COVID has acted as this catalyst to a lot of these different things that college students are worried about always. And so how do we recognize if a student is really in trouble? Well, all these might be common sense to some, right? But I hope that as we dialogue, we're able to go in a little bit deeper into these. If a student is acting out in a class, they're making inappropriate comments, they don't seem to really have much of a social filter anymore, speaking to you or other students in hostile, aggressive manners, coming in late, more passive aggressive behavior, drawing attention to themselves, socially is withdrawn to go to the opposite extreme. Or they have intense anger that isn't proportional to the presenting issue. These may be warning signs of a struggling student and someone who's struggling, maybe not just in the class, but the class or on the campus is the place where all that anger, all that stress is manifesting. This is where they're unleashing all that stuff, but there might be a lot of problems at home too. And so these behavioral and emotional problems can signal a student and demands that we view them more in their context. Being able to identify warning signs and knowing how to respond can help a student cope with any issues, to one, recognize that their issues are valid, and then deal with their emotions appropriately, and ultimately keep the school, the students around them, themselves, staff, keeping everybody safe. So these are the risk factors. When we're talking about viewing a student in context, these are the different things that we should be thinking about. We should be allowing our minds to kind of wander to and go, well, is this something that the student could be potentially worried about as they're trying to complete assignments, as they're trying to figure out financial aid, whatever the case may be for students that you interact with? Are they part of a marginalized group within Fresno, within our greater society, in American society? Have they been exposed to adverse childhood experiences, abuse, neglect, community violence? Are they from a lower socioeconomic status? Are they socioeconomically disadvantaged? Are they experiencing temporary living arrangements? This is actually, we'll go to this further on in the presentation when we're differentiating how to recognize a student in trouble in class versus over Zoom. But one thing on this note to recognize, if a student is logging in to the class week after week after week, but they have a different Zoom background each time, they don't seem to ever be logging into a meeting from the same location, that could be an indication that this person's experiencing homelessness, that they're bouncing from motels to hotels, they're couch surfing. They don't have a stable, consistent source of internet. And so they're logging in from various different places. Yes.
That has been a big concern with me. Did you mention any ways we can identify that? If we suspect it?
We'll get to some of those risk factors further on in a more linear differentiation between, when you're interacting with students over Zoom, these are the things to look out for. But just on that particular note, I wanted to throw that out there. We'll revisit later. Yep. So hold on to that thought. Grief and loss, alcohol and other drug use, social withdrawal, all of these different things. They compound a lot quicker than one would suspect, and they impact students' academic performance a lot heavier, a lot more directly than many of us may expect. All it takes is really just one fleeting depressive thought in order to take a student completely out of their zone of optimal performance. That's when they're really able to focus, to really be attentive to what it is that they need to really take care of, the tasks they need to complete as a student. All it takes is one depressive thought. Why are you doing this? Why are you going to college? You're not going to be getting anything. What's the point? That one thought, even if it's just 15 seconds in and out, it'll take them out of their zone. It's going to interrupt whatever essay they're working on or whatever formula that they're halfway through. They have to start way back at the beginning. And so really, any one of these risk factors, if you're noticing a pattern with a student, any one of these things, maybe warrants a check-in, maybe warrants hey, how are you really doing? And there are different ways to check in with a student. We'll go into different ways to start those conversations. And maybe you have had experiences of having those kind of conversations with students before. And so we'd love to hear about those as well. So distressed college students, up to 44% of college students reported having symptoms of depression, anxiety, and suicide, like what Dr. Montano was saying before.
That's actually a miss statistic right there. In suicide, actually, for our population, is the second leading cause of death, not third.
Okay. Campus psychological services are overloaded, whether it's second, third, or first. We are overloaded, and so with many experiencing staffing or office space shortages, psych services aren't in the classroom. Even if we are fully staffed, the reality is that we're not at all. That we can't be in two places at the same time. So this is kind of going back to what I said before about you guys all being primary prevention sources. We can't see the warning signs when they first show up because we're just not there. Unless a student is really proactive and they're choosing to seek assistance and they have the self-awareness to recognize, I need help. This can become a problem if I don't address it now. So educators can really play a critical role in identifying warning signs and connecting students to us.
We're jumping a couple here.
Yeah.
I'd like to add too with that, with the primary prevention piece that you all play. Primary prevention, I don't know if we really defined that for you all, but the primary prevention is so important. K through 12, they do a lot better job than higher ed because, there's more of a central kind of grouping of the students where here, they're moving from one class to another and they're, maybe even sometimes going campus to campus. So this primary prevention piece, the whole function of it is for you all to reach the students before they get to that moment of going into a full-blown depressive episode, before they're getting into, more acute things like active suicidality. When we catch them at that first moment of, hey, they're a little sad, they're a little stressed, they're a little anxious, we catch them there and give them some resources, some support. Just the encouragement too sometimes is enough, just like Dr. Rita was saying. Right there, you're already intervening, right? So you all play a huge role too in student wellness, right? Yeah, we are there. What we do primarily is that secondary and tertiary interventions. The primary prevention, yeah, we do it. You'll probably see us around campus and doing the classroom presentations, as someone said. So if any of you want those, email me. We'll do a classroom presentation on any mental health topic you want. We can do a general one, psych services is what we do. If you want something on anxiety, stress, you name it, we'll do it, sleep hygiene. But you all kind of are that front line, right? I mean, we're out there doing tablings and doing these things, but a lot of times for a student to walk up to a table, right? It doesn't happen all the time. Even if we have good cookies and coffee and all that good stuff. So some more signs and symptoms here. So kind of like we were just talking about the early identification, some more symptoms to be on the lookout: social isolation, withdrawal, lethargy. If you see an inability to focus, right? Maybe they're getting up in class a lot, walking around, taking breaks a lot. Even that, I know you pull them outside at the end of class. Hey, you got up a lot in class today. How's everything going? Are you okay? Just that. You're just showing that receptivity to what's going on with your student. Of course, more pronounced things like maybe disorganized thinking or tangential thoughts in class that aren't very coherent or linear. Yeah, that's more of a little bit more of a red flag. Let's see here. If you're seeing, Mike already kind of spoke to some of these, but more of the violent outburst. If someone's coming in, they're smelling like marijuana or they have alcohol on their breath. These are things you definitely want to probably query with them, talk to them. Also, we're going to get to this a little later. We also have an early reporting software, Maxient. Just out of curiosity, with the people here, who knows about Maxient? Raise your hand. Oh, yeah. See, this is, okay. So we've had Maxient actually like a couple years. I was here when they first implemented it. It is an early reporting system. So we encourage that early reporting of, hey, this person was walking around a lot in class. They missed a few classes. I think they may be stressed or anxious or sad. Send that report to us. It goes to our care team, our campus care team. Used to be called our behavioral intervention team. I'm on that as well as a few other administrators. And actually we have police on that as well. If we need to do more things like a welfare check or an immediate kind of intervention. And we get these cases and we talk about them as a team. And then we figure out how can we assist them. Yes.
Do students see our comments when we send into Maxient?
No,
They don't?
No.
Okay.
that goes straight to us. Yeah.
So where is Maxine?
It is, if you go to Fresno City and you type in, it's under forms. Yeah, and it'll be under, I think it's behavioral concern. Yeah, I think we also have a link at the end. Yeah.
There ought to be a general message as a sort of a header in Starfish that says, if you think there are mental health issues with a student, then go to Maxient. Here is the link, because whatever we may put in Starfish in this vein will not get to you, correct?
100%. See that, and yeah, I have an anecdotal story about that. I won't share here, but yeah, Starfish, they have the early flagging and all of that, which I think is cool. That goes to a different group and different people are monitoring Starfish. I love that idea of putting that in there because we're still refining it. Yeah, I think we should undoubtedly put that in.
Could we talk in Starfish to make that happen now?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I have 0 hands in Starfish, so I don't know.
Okay.
But I will handle that. Thank you.
Also, the thought just shared. I was thinking about it could be in Canvas if it is possible to have like a small, simple assessment for students to do on their own. How are you feeling today? Like something of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
Without this, and then if for any reason students click on it and then they take, short 5 or 10 question survey, I'm pretty sure you have a lot of assessments to that, and it automatically comes to you in. And something that is available in Canvas all the time for students, very similar to Starfish, because that will become more reactionary. That may become more proactive, right? Again.
Yep. And these are actually things we've talked about with the new basic needs stuff that we're doing here on campus. We're actually putting together kind of a basic needs hub that is in the works right now. And that's actually something we've discussed about having those sort of screeners, essentially. Yeah. So I'm just going to leave this up on the board for a quick second. Here are some early identification signs. I know Mike went over quite a bit of these, so I'm just going to move to the next slide. You may get students actually coming to you and telling you, hey, I am anxious, I am having panic attacks, I am depressed, I am suicidal. So with those overt symptoms, it's very important to talk, create that safe space, know your resources, which we're going to get into, how to refer. Not being afraid to ask certain questions. We'll get into that too. Because a lot of the times when I do these presentations, especially when I do around like suicide prevention on campus, a lot of folks have this idea, if I talk to them about suicidality, it's going to increase risk. It actually does the complete opposite. It shows, hey, this is not that off-limit topic. I can talk about this with my faculty member, and they're a support for me. It's also understanding though to make that next step with them, that next referral step, or trying to at least, right? Because we can't just throw someone in psych services. They've got to come on their own to receive our services. So as you can see, more symptoms here. Students' backgrounds. So this is important too. As you all probably know, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, right? So if you have a student who's already telling you, hey, I've been depressed since I was a kid, I've had multiple suicide attempts in my youth, these are risk factors. These are things that as a faculty, just keep in mind, right? Because when we do identification of students at risk, it's so multi-layered. You have the social, you have the personal, you have the cultural, you have the familial, you name it. It's just everything intersects. So kind of being open to just getting to know your student, asking the questions. That way you get a little bit more of this. And as we get to the whole referral process later, when you do refer to us, we love the phone calls from faculty and say, hey, I've been talking with Joe. He's in my English class. I've referred him to you all. He's, reported to me he's been depressed since 15. He says that he cuts on his forearms. when we get those calls from you and you give us that info, that's gold. That's gold, because what I do with that is then I'll tell my clinicians, because I only treat some of the high risk students here. So, but regardless, when we get those phone calls, I then brief my team at the front desk, because we always have someone on crisis Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. I'll brief them and say, hey, Joe has just been referred by Professor Smith. This is what they're endorsing or reporting. I want you to take him back. Sometimes they come in and they say, hey, I just want to fill out the services request form. Fill it out and they leave. Right? If we don't know, because they may not endorse things that are more severe. They may just submit it and then leave. And we're not mind readers, right? I've gotten those angry emails from professors. Hey, this guy told me he was suicidal. And I was like, I look at the request for a service and, oh, no suicidality, mild endorsement, right? Students don't always tell us that. So when you guys can work with us, it's awesome. So when you refer, don't be afraid to call. Call the front desk. There's always someone there. Or you can call my direct line. I have my cards if you want those at the end of this.
If I could jump in just for a quick note,
Yeah.
that, in understanding a student's background, I'd say maybe, 50% of this is just having a good memory, retaining little details about students that you see, either regularly or semi-regularly. Just allow yourself to have the thought of, Joe has a different vibe about him this semester than the last, or, this student took my class last year. Here they're in a different class. They used to be like an A student just on top of it. And, they seem to be really phoning it in this semester. I wonder what's going on, or just the little observations of, this student was so, had such energy about them. They were so attentive and, really, oh, wow, I haven't seen them in class since before Valentine's Day. They missed 2 classes. And then when they did finally show up, they've just been so lethargic and depressed. It doesn't take too much, to connect those dots together and be like, I wonder if they're having some relationship distress, if they're not off their game. A little bit of empathy, a little conversation can go a long way in just helping them feel understood and getting back into that zone again. So just having a good memory about these things.
And we're also at Psych Services always open for consults. Again, I love it when faculty do that. They'll call me, hey, Dr. Montano, I have this student I'd like to talk to you about what's going on with them. So you can always do that. You can always call my extension or our front line and have a consult right there. We'll get back to you ASAP. So my extension, I know someone put in the chat, can you explain, put the numbers? Our main line extension is 8687. If you want to write that down, it's the front desk. And mine is 8284. I have my cards though, again, so I can pass those out.
8687.
Yeah, this is the main line. Yeah.
I had a quick comment.
Oh, yes.
Yes. I was the principal of the first high school that closed due to the pandemic and at that time. And so everything you're explaining is what we saw firsthand, K-12. And so I think now as director of counseling here, and my concern is that they transition to us. They're not online anymore. They're all in person. And now they come here and they have options. K-12, they give immediate services. They have to get immediate services every time they're suicidal. It's not a 2-week wait time. It's not a 1-week wait time. Because you don't want to be the principal or the counselor, the student committed suicide at services.
Sure.
So I know you guys get it was like, can't take any more students. So, my question is in K-12, they made a tremendous push to hire more people to provide those services to students because of this alarming rate of students that need services. As a director of counseling, I don't want to be the director of counseling that has a student that commits suicide, unable as a system to provide those services in expedited fashion, because K-12, that isn't an option.
Right.
You can't tell them to come back in a week or two.
Right. Here's an immediate assessment. Yeah.
Right. Because you don't want to be the administrator that told you to come back. So it's the system creating more positions to support, the work that you guys are doing. And I know it's probably a question you can't answer right now, but hopefully that's something that's happening system-wide, knowing that we have students that are facing all these major challenges so that we can provide services more expeditiously.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I mean, it's I've been here now 5 years, and hiring new staff, and I don't need to tell you, but like budget and all the allocations, it can be tricky. I'm happy to say we've added one more postdoc position, so we've added that, which is cool. But I believe that in my talks recently with Dr. Hall and Omar, there may be a spot for now a staff psychologist coming on and bringing on another psych. So we're definitely moving in that direction. We do utilize a lot of our community resources too, and 24/7 crisis lines, whether they're local or national. The other interesting thing, and it is a challenge, K through 12, you're dealing with minors, right? So you can kind of have a little bit more push to say go, whereas here they're adults. So it gets really tricky legally to say, hey, you just said you're suicidal. Let's go into psych. That being said, we're going to get to this later. If there's active suicidality, right? If you're saying, hey, this is imminent, Joe just told me he's been stockpiling his parents' pills and is going to take them this weekend, you can say, hey, let's go to psych right now. And they say, screw you. No, I'm not going. They've already told you enough. Your next call should obviously be campus police to do the welfare check and say, hey, Joe told me he's got all these pills at home. He said he's going to do it this weekend. That's the call, right? Because that's the call we're likely going to make too. If it's that imminent and the plan's there, the means are there. So, yeah. But we're working on it. We're definitely working on it. And like I said, we do have people available Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Always someone's there to handle crisis situations. Some more signs: decreased participation, poor attendance, kind of the frequent call outs, right? I can't make it to class today. Here's some other things for the virtual space. You're seeing those negative interactions with parents or peers or children even, right? A lot of our students have kids. They're virtual, and you're seeing a lot of these negative interactions or distressing situations online. That should also be a bit of a warning sign, because again, the at-risk student has many different complexities, right? Like I named, it could be social concerns, could be personal concerns, could be academic, cultural, right? And they all interact. Zoning out, short-term memory concerns, like, hey, we just at the beginning of class talked about this. What's the class topic today? I don't know. Should be able to do that even if they're zoning out just a bit, normal zoning out. So these imminent signs, I would say really here, this first one's really important. If a student has recently, we put past 48 hours, had a serious fight or physical, verbal altercation with a peer, family, or significant other. I'll tell you right now, when you're looking at like suicidality, one of the biggest risk factors for our population, that college 18 to, here I know our age range is quite significant, but 18 to like 26, 27 is the end of a relationship. So it's a huge risk factor. And you put other things on top of that. Yeah. And you also got to remember, I don't know if there's any of like bio folks in here, biology professors or anything like that, but the brain isn't even fully developed, right? 18 to 25, right? And the research shows that it's developing even later now. So the impulse control, the logical thought sometimes goes out the window a little bit. Recently kicked out, recent death of a family member or close individual, drugs, anger issues. Again, the suicidal comments or statements, never take those lightly, right? It's unfortunate. It's kind of become more commonplace for people to make those jokes around death and suicide. Even those, we should be kind of honing in on a little. So it's important to really, really be aware of what your students are saying.
On that last note of, suicidal comments or statements, again, anecdotally, but, I've had professors walk students over to psych services and say, hey, we've been talking about themes of death and suicide. They made a couple of comments in my classes. And then, I take them back. I'm doing a more a thorough assessment. And they report that the context of the assignments, whether it was an English class where they were reading Edgar Allan Poe, or a philosophy class where they were talking about some of the existentialists and Nietzsche and stuff like that. Well, it was the content of the class. And so, but they thought about it just a little too deeply, got sucked into a rabbit hole on those themes, and so I'm like, oh, okay, there isn't a real severe risk here, but I'm still glad that this professor didn't take the chance and said, well, I'm going to walk you over to psych services, or I'm going to encourage you to talk to a professional about this stuff so that you don't get too lost in these thoughts. Better to be safe than sorry.
Yeah. I think. And that's usually like when we get those, it's great because, they may not even need our services. They might not need to set up the sessions with us, but hey, they needed that quick 25-minute, we call them crisis sessions, but just that quick 25-minute touch base with a professional who can walk me through what just came up for them. And okay, it feels good. I got it off my chest and I'm good to go now. So great point. Okay, so how to respond to the imminent. This is imminent warning signs. So this is, hey, these are pretty severe, pretty acute signs. So obviously the safety of the student and those involved is a big consideration. We work very close with our police department here at FCC and in our district because they go from campus to campus, as you all probably already know. They're really good at dealing with our students. The imminent stuff is they're telling you they're suicidal, that it's active. They have plans, they have intent, they have means. The homicidal ideation of, man, I just want to come on campus and beat people up. Or I had a patient once at UC who walked in and said, I just use a skateboard. I'm on a skateboard. I just want to run down campus and just bludgeon everyone with my skateboard. Okay, let's talk more about that. Right? Let's understand this. How imminent was it? Is it just a fantasy or is it something more real? But those sort of things, potentially when it's imminent, or, threats with weapon, if they're carrying a weapon, skateboard, knife, anything like that, you definitely want to call campus police. You do. Because most of the time, even if you bring them to us, if this is very entrenched and imminent, we're also going to call campus PD, likely to arrange a 5150, which is a hospitalization. And that really is to keep the student safe. If it's suicidality, if it's homicidality, it's to keep the campus safe as well. I will say this, a lot of the times, students don't like that, right? They don't want you to call police. But when it's imminent, we got to do it. The other thing here, if you have a student who is imminent, they're saying, hey, I'm going to do this. You can also kind of let them know, hey, I want to help you. I want to provide some resources for you. We're going to call campus police. They can maybe get you some resources and support, right? They're not arrested. I want to make that real clear. Like a 5150 is not an arrest. It is an involuntary hold, a psychiatric hold, but they're not getting arrested. A lot of times if they go voluntarily, because there's a difference between involuntary and voluntary 5150s. So if it's voluntary, it's not on their record. It's just, hey, I'm going to the ER, essentially, made an ER trip. If they are involuntary, right? This is the student that's like, don't take me. I'm not going. No. And we have to say, I'm sorry, you have to go. That's the involuntary. That does go on their record. So a lot of times we work with the students, and you can do this too. If it's imminent, to say, hey, look, go voluntary. It's, you go to the hospital, you're going to get the treatment you need. You're going to be exposed to probably group therapies, individual therapies, medication, right? Almost do a little sales pitch, right? At that point on why it would benefit them. Yes.
When you say record, what record are you referring to? Please help.
Yeah. Yeah. It would be more of like I think at that point it is more of like a police record. Yeah. Because they have to do their report, right? Their 5150 report. Yeah. And it can also impact, like, say there's avid hunters.
Right.
Yeah, you can't have guns. I can't remember how many years. I think it's 2 years. Maybe it might even be longer than that. But some rights do when you go involuntary are
But
affected.
they go to a hospital, not to this. They go to a hospital, though, not to a jail cell.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Usually, a lot of times they'll take them to Exodus Behavioral Health, which is on Kings Canyon. That's a crisis stabilization unit here at Fresno. Sometimes they'll take them to an ER, like St. Agnes, to clear them medically first. Community has an inpatient, so they'll do both of that there, the medical clearance and then admit them. It's also important. I do this when I train my staff every year because our training staff is all trainees getting their license in psychology. But one of the things I always tell them, and I'm going to tell you all too, because I think it's important to know, if you're ever calling our PD and doing a welfare check or say, hey, I need you to come out and assess this student for me, give them all the details, right? Let them know, hey, Joe said this, this, and this, because sometimes when the officer goes in to sit with Joe's like, no, I'm good. Not suicidal. I don't want to go. But they're like, hey, your professor said this, right? So giving that thorough consult to the PD is very important.
It is there.
Yeah.
Every situation is different, and none of us here are experts. The two of you up there have the training.
Yes.
But I learned something that kind of shocked me yesterday in our division meeting. That our campus PD are now armed with AR-15s. And that just really stopped me on my tracks. So it's, God forbid any of this deem a situation is imminent when it ends up not being, and somebody is just egging the police on to kill them. So it just, when I learned that yesterday, they got them from the Fresno PD apparently.
Interesting.
So I just thought I'd bring that up for what it's worth.
Yeah. 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 Those are tough situations. And again, you're right. Every situation is different. You don't know how a student's going to react when police come in. That's why it's really important to try and give the consult, also give the education on why PD is coming out, what they're going to do. It's very simple. They're just going to come out and they're going to ask you a few questions. They're going to try and get you the support you need, the resources you need. That way you can try to bring it down a little bit. Sometimes the student's not, right? I mean, we've had clients come in and literally threaten what you just said when we've, said, hey, we need to have police come out. Oh, you want me to commit suicide by cop, right? Like, and it gets intense. You can try and mitigate it as best as you can with the education you can provide them on why you're doing it, what PD is going to do. But you're right. The situation is different.
For what it's worth, in my experiences, with police, and it is very hit or miss. You have no idea, what officer is going to be reporting to the scene after you made that call, right? But I've found that regardless of the context or the severity, if I'm able to keep my calm, the police officers feed off of that. I think in the times where I've had voluntary psychiatric holds with clients, and I'm students real calm, I'm real calm, I'm giving that context to police, like, hey, I've a student over here that's going through a lot right now. They voluntarily want to put themselves on a 72-hour hold. Could you come over here and help us, get that and make that happen for them? They come over and they're super casual, they're ready to go, as opposed to, in psych service, we have a silent panic button for students that are really lashing out, potentially violent. I think if we hit that button, the police immediately calls us back. If they don't have anyone pick up the phone and answer and say like, oh, we hit it by accident, or hey, thanks for calling us. This is the situation. We're able to calm them down from there. If we hit that panic button and they have no context, then yeah, that's when we see maybe 5 or 6 officers come over. Yeah. They're ready to use their firearm if necessary, and so it's all about just being able to be calm, to maintain your own composure. Police officers are human too. They feed off of that energy. They stay calm themselves. And you're able to stay present with the student as a grounding factor. You keeping your calm is going to keep the student calm and keep everybody cooperative. Again, you said it yourself, you're not professionals, but you are still a human being with a connection to this other human being who's having a crisis. That does mean something really powerful.
It really does. And I mean, all the research, and I mean, I've been working with patients for 13 years now. The crisis situations typically are very short, right? It's this like almost this curve, right? Almost like a bell curve kind of. It's building. Here's the crescendo or climax of the crisis, and it lasts for a couple minutes, and then usually like that. So yeah, just like what Mike said, just you providing that space sometimes can get them right through that. And yeah, they still may be heightened, but they're not at that key pivotal point that can cause something really negative to occur. I also want to jump into this though, and then I'm going to turn it back over to you, Mike. But not jumping to conclusions, right? So many times it's like, hey, my student said this. Let me call PD right now. It's almost just allow the process to unfold. Give yourself a little bit of time with the student. And yeah, if PD needs to get involved later, fine. But, again, that idea of being compassionate, warm, supportive is so important with the students. We see here, you want to keep some of these things in mind. Do no harm. Understand violence and aggression within a context. Don't tolerate the stereotypes. Consider students' developmental level as well, and look for all those multiple warning signs that we talked about. So you're gathering information. You're being present. We're going to get into like specific things and how you can engage a student. So I don't want to get into that yet because there's body language, questions you can ask, things like that we're going to give you today. But just do your best. I know it's going to sound very basic, and sometimes in a crisis situation, it's hard to do. But do your best to also calm yourself, right? Because working with someone who's sad, depressed, anxious, panic attacks, right? They're, I can't breathe. I can't. If you're like, oh my God, we got to get you to the help, they're psych, you're just amping it up. Right. So staying aware of yourself, if you need to take a deep breath, right, to kind of ground yourself with them, it's so important, right? When the faculty member walks in and they're just distressed, it's throwing the student up even more too. So do your best to calm yourself as well. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Rita here. Do you have a question up here in front? Yeah, go for it.
Okay, yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that I can see Steve. These are very tiny on my screen. Oh. So, yeah, so I'm an instructor here and I teach American Sign Language. I've taught online the last 2 years. And I did have one student who just seemed really great, right? They were that top-notch, amazing student. They kept up with all the assignments. They were so nice, so friendly, so kind. And then all of a sudden, they weren't showing up right during midterms. They sent me a message basically saying that they went to the emergency room because of an attempted suicide, because they did plan on hurting themselves to the point of death. And I didn't know what to do in that situation. I decided to reach out via Starfish. I did the flagging to the best of my ability to see what type of resources I could provide for them. And then I referred them to counseling and basically was told that they seemed confident, that they felt confident to share with me. And it was due to a family situation and things that were happening. It was kind of stuff that was happening at home was impacting the student. And so when you think about that, I was like, okay, but you're already staying home and this person has to be there every day in this environment that is causing these intrusive thoughts and these harmful ideologies. And so when you think about that, right, saying, did you go see the police? Did you go see someone? Did you talk to someone? Like you were talking about, following through with the process and certain procedures that need to happen. So at that point, we had to decide what was best would be to drop that class so that that person could then heal and recover and essentially move out of that household, to remove themselves from the situation. And it seems that was the best decision, was for them to remove themselves from the class. And so that was a first time experience for me in a virtual setting, no less, right? It wasn't something that I could see in a student face to face. This was all just over a camera through Zoom. And that's why I think it's really important to share that with all of the instructors here today in person and on Zoom, right? Is, we can't just assume that our students are always okay.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, first of all. And I'm sorry you had to go through that experience, and, sorry that the student had to go through that as well. It sounds like you did a really good job, actually, though, of once you got the information, doing the flag and starfish, which is fine. Also, trying to get them connected to resources potentially on campus. Moving out of their environment, that was big. I mean, we see that with a lot of students too, right? The environment they are going into or living in is we use the word toxic, or you can be harming to them. So that's amazing. If that was really a big trigger for them, that's great. And unfortunately, with folks who are suicidal, sometimes you may never know, right? If they are wanting to commit suicide, a lot of times they're actually not going to say anything, right? And then you find out in ways like this, where, oh man, Bill was hospitalized for a suicide. Man, they were an A student. They were here all the time. They were doing great. And so those are the real tricky ones, the ones that you're a lot of times not going to catch until you get the report from the hospital or from upper admin, hey, this is what happened. I will say this, when someone is hospitalized for a suicide attempt, or even if they go in and they're just having severe depression and they're actually inpatient, because you don't have to be suicidal to be inpatient. All hospitals do have a mandate to provide post-hospitalization referrals and care, which is nice. So there's usually a social worker that says, hey, here's a psychologist in the community, here's a psychiatrist in the community, let's get you set up before you leave. So most of the time that's in place. A lot of the times these reports also come through in care, right? Or, through Maxient and the care report, we'll get those and say, okay, we'll make sure they are connected with treatment. And if they're not, we always give them our info and other campus services. But usually at that level, when there's more severe pathology, you want more long-term care, right? We traditionally here use a short-term model. Students get 4 to 6 sessions with us. For certain cases, we can't do it for every student. I wish we could. We do offer some long-term care, but most of it's short. We do also refer to the community and use our community resources a lot, but those are tough situations.
We had a couple of comments in the chat as well, just about further on the topic of when students are virtual, as well as what to do on weekends. And that's where I'll echo Dr. Montano on using community resources, especially the national one. So the National Suicide Hotline, as of, I think, July 1st of this year, they switched over to, they had just a normal, 800 number for a while. Now it's just 988 that immediately gets you connected with an anonymous service that there's always going to be someone 24/7, someone on the other end of that line that will be able to talk to students in that escalated state, talk to a trained professional. So that's a go-to referral from us, as well as other community mental health clinics in the area that you yourself, or even the student, if they're regulated enough, to just do a quick Google search. They'll find several in the area that, we have in a PDF of community resources we can make available to you all as well. And you can just forward that to the student. But also just if they're regulated enough to just, to look it up themselves, and you can even guide them through. It's like, hey, do you have your smartphone on you? Do you have your computer? Hey, let's just Google this phrase and just tell me, let's go one by one what things come up. And, let's take a look at their website. Do you feel comfortable talking to them right now? Give them a call, see how you feel. And that alone, and of giving them some agency and some control, that also will de-escalate them and start to regulate them, give them a little bit more control over their own mental health, which is always going to be something that makes them feel better.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but with the suicide lifeline, can't they also text?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of students are more comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think being able to mention that is useful too.
I think it's 14714 or 741. Yeah, you can literally Google crisis text line.
Yeah.
And that number's there.
The other thing I was going to say is I've done this, and because we're required to have a psych service statement on our syllabi, I've also put the number for the crisis, like our helpline on there, which I think is something people might want to do. It might make people uncomfortable at first and seem kind of morbid, but I don't think it is. And I think it could be very helpful.
More resources, the better.
Yeah. It's just something to consider.
Awesome. Absolutely. Yeah. Question.
So you've had from a few students I've had since going back to face-to-face, especially last fall. One is they're really reclusive. They're hood on, it's over, they just hunker down and hiding in a corner. And the other is kind of defensive, like they have a wall up, they'll brush you off even. That's fine. But last semester I had one of the reclusive ones. I do in-class writings. Every class that they you can't give them points for just coming, so they do in-class writing for the points. And I think it was like midway, he doodled some pretty loud, angry-looking things, and so I didn't do anything. But I'm now. I don't know if that was the right call or not.
I would say that, it's probably more lower level stuff, but see that's the stuff we're trying as a care team, right? When I was talking about Maxian, we're trying to create a campus climate where like something like that, you fill out a quick Maxian report.
Okay.
Hey, Joe, I observed him drawing some pretty violent, aggressive. And we may look at that and say, hey, I don't know if this actually deems an intervention right now, but we'll keep Joe on the radar. Or you know what, maybe we will reach out and give some resources. So we want to create a campus climate of reporting, even those little things.
Yeah, I was really stuck by that one.
Yeah.
On the reclusive or defensive ones, I actually did get at least one to come out of the shell.
Mm-hmm.
So that made me feel, but sometimes
it's tough.
It's tough.
It is totally tough. I mean, I think just, extending an ear is probably going to be your best bet, right?
Yeah.
Take it or not.
Right. I think with the one I started ushering them toward the group. But some point, so I was really glad to see that.
Yeah.
Before that, he was the defensive, like I would go up to ask him. But anyway, yeah, that one surprised me. I was like, when I saw it, I was like, whoa.
Yeah. I think that would be a good one to report.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, Dr. Rita, I emailed you probably 5 weeks or so before the semester ended, because it seemed like amongst the 90 or so students I had within my 5 sections, I had a tsunami suddenly.
I remember this.
Yes,
Yeah.
of students, all female, 5 of them, who I guess trusted me enough to say, I'm having mental health issues. And you gave me a very detailed email of those community resources, because at that time you said, we can't book anybody else for appointments because we're booked for the rest of the semester. And with the 5 minutes that are officially remaining in this session, I know you have a lot of material to cover, but can you enlighten everybody here about those community resources before we leave the room?
Yes,
Please.
At that point in the semester, and just before the Thanksgiving break, we had a wait list of students that was approximately about 100 students long. And so in order to make sure that, students weren't slipping through the cracks, the students that had taken the initiative earlier in the semester to receive services, to make sure that none of them fell through the cracks, we did shut down our link temporarily. It is now back up. But during that time, between November to the end of last semester, any student that filled out our request form, they immediately got an email back, explaining the situation, but then also being given the contact information for a clinic that we partner pretty closely with through the California School of Professional Psychology here in Fresno, called Alliant University, and their on-campus clinic, the W. Gary Cannon Psychological Services Center. They've been gracious enough to help with our overflow, as long as they explain that they are a currently enrolled Fresno City College student. They get 10 free sessions with one of their clinicians over there. And they are a clinic that, sees students in the evenings, on the weekends, I understand.
Yeah, they have a very, very big schedule where they do night appointments. And that was a really neat thing that I got that about 2 years ago, made that connection with that clinic where, they're giving our students free sessions. So, and all of these resources are on our website. You can go to our webpage. I'm updating it right now for the new semester. So bear with me if there's a little bit of outdated stuff on there from last semester. But if you go to the community resources, we have a huge list of things you can literally print out or refer a student to. Excellent.
The two facilities that Dr. Matano mentioned before, Exodus Recovery and St. Agnes, they're also on that community resource page, among other ones that are more outpatient solutions. That the student is only like minimal to moderate risk, but still wants to talk to someone sooner rather than later.
Yeah, question.
What are the stages? So as far as let's say you have someone comes in, presents with bipolar 2, and you want them to have medication. So do you work with specific medical groups or specific?
We have referrals. So unfortunately, we don't have a psychiatrist on staff, but we do have a lot of community resources that we work with who provide medication for students. One of our big referrals is house psychiatry. Another one is university psychiatry as well. And that's all like the UCSF residents. I know the director there, Dr. Goddard, who's awesome. Probably one of the best psychiatrists I've ever worked with. And we refer our students there. So, and we're very hands-on with it. We'll have our clinicians complete ROIs, which release some information, so we can consult and have that coordination of care. So we're doing that.
And if you have a student that isn't, mental distress, but is, identifying a specific medical explanation for it, they come to you and say, hey, I have this bipolar 2 diagnosis. I haven't been able to get a refill of my medications from a psychiatrist. I've just been, the pharmacy is giving me trouble. They're, pointing to something specifically medical or biological, walk them over to health. And then, health services and us, we work very closely together from the health center. The nurses there can then bring us in if there is a 2-pronged solution that needs to be found there in regulating the student. But absolutely, if they're tying something medical or physical to their concerns, if that's the primary presenting problem, then bring them over to health.
So you really didn't actually miss too much more. I know there was quite a bit of slides, but a lot of it really was those little like micro counseling skills that anyone can do. The non-judgmental body language when talking to someone, being open, keeping a nice, calm voice, asking open-ended questions, even direct questions, especially with suicidality. There's nothing wrong with asking your student, are you thinking of killing yourself? We ask those questions all the time. If they say yes, then we know we're dealing with something else. So this is what the Maxine report looks like. I wanted to throw that up there. There's the link if you want to take that down. I will say this, since we didn't get through all the material, if any of you want additional training or us to, if you're a dean or a department head and you want us to do this presentation again, we can do that. just again, email Mike or myself, or give us a call. We'll do that for y'all. Thank you so much. And if there are more questions, you can always email. We'll answer those for you. Thank you.